I'm Edward Simpson. I'm Chair of Physical Sciences. Currently, I am working with students north of Moab, Utah on a whole series of projects. How I come about the research topics is often interest. So if I find an interest in something, I'll develop them. I will also get people approach me about research topics. So some of the work I did in South Africa was dealing with topics someone was interested in, matched my expertise, then went there. The Utah work that I'm currently doing is associated with Jim Kirkland. He's the state paleontologist of Utah who found a whole big group of Utah raptor dinosaurs. It's probably about 2003, so a while ago. And in the process, it is a huge excavation that they worked on part-time. So it got to the point where they were basically encasing them, trying to get them out. Then they finally decided they needed somebody to come in and tell them how they were killed before they got the block out. So he invited me out in 2013, and I came out, went into the quarry with Jim, and I started pointing out all the things he missed. So when you look at bringing in predatory dinosaurs together, bone beds, which are more than two of an animal in there, could be a herbivore and a predator, it's more than two. So bone beds are themselves interesting on how they form, because it's unusual to get multiple organisms dead or building up in the same area. The Utah raptor block was interesting because when they were excavating it, they could see a large Utah raptor in it. Plus, they were getting skulls that were maybe this big. So they were getting basically baby skulls. So we knew that was some sort of family system, adult, subadults, and infants. So that became one of the key things. How do you get that grouping together? How do they come into this mass kill? So when Jim Kirkland was preparing it, he came up with the hypothesis that it was some sort of quicksand deposit, which would explain how they got stuck. My job was to come out and was to test it. Okay, is it true? Is it false? What else could possibly do it? The answer is it was probably quicksand, and there's a lot of physical evidence around the blocks that it was a spring that came up. And the way you make quicksand is you bring water up from the bottom, which takes the sand grains and moves them apart. They essentially float in water. They look like they're sand, but when you step in, you sink in. So the idea is that they came in probably for water and got stuck and couldn't get themselves out. These had feathers too, which would make it much more complicated than pulling a regular hand or foot out, because the feathers would get wet. They would be more resistant. Quicksand seems to be the best answer based on the structures. One of the big things that came out of it is looking for the modern analogs. Analogs are basically modern examples, so we'll study the modern examples to look for features that we can go back and find in the ancient. So the Lake Powell features had a whole series of slump features, blocks that had actually been collapsing into the crater. In the Utah raptor, we could recognize those collapse features back into the crater. And that was one of the things that one of my contributions is recognizing that and putting that big picture, using the analogs to come back in and interpret the crater. So the research in Utah, the Utah raptor, the rock units they're in, we're out there now trying to look at other things than the Utah raptor. So we're looking at the broader environments, working in Arches National Monument. There's actually mobile salt below that's pushing up and making arches. So we're looking at that and trying to figure out how that impacted the rocks that are trapping the Utah raptor. The last number we're at, I think, was one adult, 2 subadults, and 5 babies. Then it could change. It could be more. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more in there. The actual block itself sits in a museum in south of Salt Lake City. It's called Thanksgiving Point. It's a natural history museum there. The block is so big that it takes an incredibly long amount of time to prepare it. So it's big, plus it has small bones in it. So when the preparation is done, it's done with microscopes, and it's done with essentially needle-like, they would be jackhammers that you use. So it's an incredibly tedious process to prepare the material out. It's slow, it's exacting, and you have to have the right person to prepare it. Scott Matson is the preparer who's doing it. If it was done full time, it would probably take 6 to 7 years to prepare it at least. And that's plus or minus, well, probably on the plus side, 3 years, not the minus side. But almost every day, Scott, every day he works, he publishes and puts stuff on Facebook or up on the Utah Raptor Project so you can see what he's pulling out. And it's pretty surprising, some of the stuff. They just got the big claw of Utah Raptor. It's a baby, and you can actually see where the toenail is on it, prepared out. So that was a great discovery, not unexpected based on our model, but it was good to see. It was really spectacular because that's really like a soft tissue in it. They appear to have, we're not quite sure what it is, but it appears to be an impression of a piece of skin of a lizard, which would be something non-dinosaurian in the block itself, which is something we'd also expect to see. So every day is a new adventure when they're preparing out. So, you know, what's going to be in that block? Who knows? The whole top plaster cast isn't off yet. There's a skull that sits right underneath the plaster they haven't touched yet. Every day in that project, preparing that's on an adventure.